And good morning, good morning. Welcome in. Thanks for making us your SEC football show of choice in the great state of Mississippi. We appreciate you streaming the show on the Out of Bounds radio app in Mississippi and outside of the state. You can watch the show on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports. 105.9 The Zone. The SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue. The official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds show, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. All of our guests join us on the Coors Light guest line. We welcome in our friend Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. We'll start with the Lane train and what happened Saturday night in Oxford. Lugs, this, according to some people, your eyes see more than ours. According to some, this is a new version of the Baylor offense. Lane has taken what Kendall Briles taught him at FAU, meshed in what he already liked, probably a little bit of Jeff Lebby too, and now we get an offense that's hitting on all cylinders. What did you see Saturday night in Oxford?
I think there's some fairness in that statement, that some ideas have been blended, but I think it started long before he took the job at FAU. I think he started morphing what originally was a Norm Chow-based scheme, the old BYU, a lot of West Coast concepts, and moved on to SC and took it and started to morph it more with zone read concepts, RPO concepts, and you still have the same semblance of a run game. And so, listen, the best way for any scheme to work is to have good players. And Ole Miss has really good players right now on offense, and they're dynamic. I think you and I have talked, privately over the course of the last couple of weekends about, getting those guys in the right position, which is what coaching is, so that your kids on game day have the chance to be the most successful. But yeah, as Jeff Lebby and some of those ideas and some of the, because what people fail to realize about the old Art Briles version of his air raid is they were a run-first football team. They wanted to, when he had those really good teams at Baylor, they ran the football like crazy. And so I think that's kind of where they have deviated from the norm. Mike Leach probably kicked Art Briles off the air raid train, and because of that. And so Lane's always been a guy that wants to run it. Now they just become more creative in the ways they're doing so.
Kenny Yeboah, Luke's. So he was going to Baylor because of the Matt Rule tie to Temple before Rule takes the Carolina Panthers job. And when that didn't work out, Kiffin and Lebby are there to scoop him up. He is one of those, you and I have discussed this forever, as you've been the number one recruiting guy with ESPN for years. He's a late bloomer, two-star. Penn State put out some feelers but didn't make the move. And all of a sudden, Kiffin's coming off coaching a Mackey Award winner. And Kenny Yeboah may be the best grad transfer land in the SEC. We thought it'd be Newman, maybe KJ Costello, among others. This guy is flat out talented, Luke's.
He really is. It's almost like Evan Ingram 2.0, right? I mean, he's kind of their mini version of what Kyle Pitts has turned into for Florida, where you can line him up anywhere. You can have him as an H-back. You can move him across the formation. He can line up out wide. You can use him in the red area on jump balls. He's athletic enough to stretch the seam, so you got to be very careful matching him up with a linebacker. There are so many opportunities with a guy like this, and that's kind of, this type of player, and I referenced Kyle Pitts, everybody's looking for this hybrid guy, this guy that can play in line, that you don't have to substitute for. Because if you can stay on obvious passing downs as well as your run downs, if you can stay in 11 personnel and not have to get into 10 personnel, one back and no tight end, you're a lot more difficult to defend, because no matter what, the threat of run and the threat of play action pass that involves the tight end is always on the field. And I think that's the goal for folks trying to find that type of player that can create a lot of problems.
Tom Luginbill on the Coors Light guest line, recapping Ole Miss and Bama. So I agree. He's doing a remark. When do you think the light bulb turned on for him? This is a guy who acknowledged in his press conference last year. I was there in Oxford. Hey, I got too much too early. All right, I'm coaching for Pete Carroll at 27, maybe because of my father. Al Davis offers me way too early the Raiders job. The rest is history. So he went through, some serious ups and downs, and then he lands at Bama. When do you think the light bulb, boom, came on for him as far as he started really transitioning into this really, really good coach and excellent play caller that you were just now describing?
I think he's always been an excellent coach. He's always been an excellent play caller. Obviously, you grow and you mature and you get better. He's extremely bright. But I think to answer your question, when you become an assistant at Alabama, there's only one voice coming out of there, and it's the head coach. And I think it was really good for Lane Kiffin to be in a position where he didn't have to deal with the media, wasn't allowed to deal with the media.
Right.
He didn't have to deal with outside distractions, didn't have to deal with, anything that didn't have to do with X's and O's or recruiting. Those are the two things he had to do. He had to coach and he had to recruit. And when you're not having to do any of the other stuff, I think it gives you an opportunity to grow and develop, and also an opportunity to reflect. Because what he probably found was, I don't get myself in too much trouble when I'm not allowed to tweet or I'm not allowed to talk to the media. I just end up coaching. And listen, does he like social media? Does he like to have fun with it? Absolutely. Here's how I would probably label him now versus, let's just say, him taking the head job at Tennessee. He thinks twice before he clicks send. That's probably the biggest area of growth.
You're a West Coast guy.
Yeah.
When did you, with your dad's connections and your connections, you know a lot of people all around the country, but you cut your teeth out there and so on. And when did you run into or know Lane?
So Steve Sarkisian and myself were rival quarterbacks at the junior college level out in Southern California. He was at El Camino College. I was at Palomar College. We go back a long way. And then when I was coaching in the XFL, we actually brought Sark in. He'd been playing in the CFL. We brought him in, and we did a workout with him. We wanted to see if he was a potential guy for us to draft. He doesn't get drafted in the XFL draft, so he decides to go and start coaching. And that's when he got into the coaching ranks. Then when he ends up at SC, I knew Norm Chow from my days growing up in San Diego when my dad was the head coach at San Diego State, and Norm was the offensive coordinator at BYU with those really good early 90s teams. So I went out and I would visit Pete Carroll and his staff and just kind of get a sense of, how they're doing things. And I would do this with a lot of stats across the country. And that's when I first actually had the opportunity to meet Lane.
Okay. So, man, Norm Chow, Pete Carroll, incredible. Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. Hey, let's go to Bama. It looks like Charlie Strong may take over play calling duties. A lot of people thought that when they did this deal 8-9 months ago, whenever it was. Pete Golding may be an excellent coach. He just may not be ready, kind of like what you were talking about with Lane. It takes some guys a little bit of time and maturity and maybe a couple of jobs to really figure it out. But they did whatever they wanted against Alabama. So where does this leave the defensive specialist in Nick Saban and Alabama's defense going forward?
Well, to not make knee-jerk reactions and try to avoid becoming a prisoner of the moment, we've seen this happen before. It's actually happened with Ole Miss.
Yes.
And we've seen them go up and down the field and score a lot of points. We've seen them get in shootouts with Texas A&M during the Johnny Manziel era. What we haven't seen is it turn into a reoccurring theme. That's the one thing that I think we've got to acknowledge in all of this. If you're an Alabama fan, are you frustrated? Are you scratching your head as to how this could happen? Well, of course you are. But until you start seeing it happen every week, let's tap the brakes a little bit, because Alabama still has really, really good players. I think they ran up against a bit of a buzzsaw. Let's not forget, Ole Miss did this to a very good defensive Kentucky team and did it to Florida too. So let's give some credit to Ole Miss for not only their players but their scheme and how they were coached and how they've been producing. I think the thing that was surprising to me was the explosive plays. It's one thing to move the ball in Alabama or maybe score points. It's another thing to have gains of 20, 30, 40 yards. And I think because it's Alabama and we become so accustomed to them being a suffocating defense, consistently overall, when something like that happens to them, it becomes magnified. It becomes even bigger because you're just not used to seeing it. So I would probably withhold a long-term judgment on that. Now, if you come to me in 2 to 3 weeks and say, okay, well, Georgia just did it too, or, whoever, now we've got a conversation.
Right.
Now there's, that's one thing that hasn't happened with this ball club. If it's happened before and they've looked bad or they've played poorly, it hasn't become a trend.
Okay, well, the way the game is played and called today, would you rather be good on offense or defense? Because Saturday night, Lugs, we've got a team coming into Tuscaloosa who is incredible on the defensive side of the football, and I think they're, got some nice pieces on offense.
They're serviceable on offense.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, even though Bama's loaded with 4 and 5 stars on both sides of the ball, we have an offense that is ginning under Sark and a defense that has yet to find their way. And Golding got exposed last year, and he got exposed in the first 3 games this year, and they're ranked 68th in total defense, which is unbelievable for the Alabama Crimson Tide. So this day and age, as a former quarterback, but as someone who calls all these games, what would you rather be today? Really good on offense or really good on defense?
Really good on defense, because I still think at the end of the day, those are the teams that are standing at the end, especially if you're good up front. Clemson is Clemson, but Clemson is not Clemson if they don't have the defense that you saw on Saturday night. They're not. They're going to be in shootouts every week without that defense. And when you ask me that question, and it's easy to take the offensive route because you have a chance to win every week, and you have a chance to, if you're slightly better than somebody, you don't screw it up, you're probably going to win. But there's a reason Oklahoma can't win a college football playoff game. And there's a reason why the Alabamas and the Clemsons and the Ohio State, and let's just say LSU last year, there is a reason why they are routinely in the college football playoff, because they got one common denominator. They got a quarterback, and they're loaded up front on the defense.
Interesting. Okay. I guess I see what you're saying with LSU. They didn't have a dominant defense, but midway through the second quarter in the national championship game, once they started figuring it out, they started getting Clemson off the field. So, in other words, they were good enough to impose their will, whether it was up front or at times or in the back end of that defense, to do what they needed to do to win the title. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And some teams are going to be dominant on defense. LSU wasn't a dominant defense. They were a pretty good defense. They were a well-coached defense. They were really good in pass defense in terms of limiting explosive plays and tackling. Everything that they can't seem to do this year is what they did a year ago. And it's interesting because it's easy to reference the Big 12 when you're having this conversation, but there's a reason why Kansas State and Iowa State survive, have winning records, and upset teams with better players, and it isn't because of their offense. It's because of the defense. It's because of the physicality and so on and so forth. So if you took, let's just say, Oklahoma, Alabama, whoever it is, LSU's caliber of player, all right, and put it at Iowa State with their caliber of defense, Iowa State would be winning the Big 12 every year.
Boy, Oklahoma's in trouble.
Oklahoma's in trouble. Texas is in trouble. And listen, what happened with Ole Miss and Alabama? And you bring up a good point. That wasn't exclusive to Alabama and Ole Miss this last week. That was college football wide.
Right.
That was the ACC, the SEC, outside of the Clemson game and the Georgia game, Big 12. That was everywhere.
Tom Luginbill on the Coors Light guest line. Blake, you have a question for Lugs. You seem to be distraught.
I am.
Morning.
Well,
I'm upset with your answer.
And he didn't like your answer that you went with defense. So, Blake,
because
go ahead
here's
and ask
why.
your question.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
A truly dominant defense I get what you're saying, but that's not typically what happens. I feel like most of the time, especially in today's game, most defenses, as we've heard Mike Leach say, although he's a terrible example the last 2 weeks, not every defense doesn't have Deion Sanders at every corner. They don't have a Josh Allen on each end or a Jeffrey Simmons in the middle. That they're not all built all the way across like that. So there are weak points defensively. And in today's game, when I look at the last 6 years of the playoff, the winner has scored 42, 44, 45, 47, 42, and then there's the 2 years that were lower scoring, 26 and 35. But my point of all that is to say you have to score points to win. So maybe if I rephrase the question this way, maybe I'll get the answer I want. We'll see.
Or not.
If you have statistically, it looks like if you're a top 25 defense, you don't have to be elite, but you can be 20 to 25 and put yourself in the position. So my question to you would be, if you've got an elite side of the ball and a better than average side of the ball, don't you want your elite side to be offense in this game and that quarterback to be the guy? Because if you have LSU last year is a great point. They had a serviceable defense, at times gave up a ton of points, but your offense was so elite it didn't matter.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't disagree with you if you're eliminating the Clemsons and Alabamas and Ohio State out of the equation. I think you're right in what you're saying. I would agree that you're going to have a great chance to win every week if you're dominant on offense and just good enough on defense. And listen, let's define good enough.
Because Oklahoma's terrible. Like, that's not good enough. They're in the
that's
60s. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
That's exactly right. So, and let's define. I'll give you a prime example. I'm going to use Oklahoma State as an example here. Oklahoma State defensively, statistically, in their best years, all right, 10-win seasons, 11-win seasons, are routinely giving up 450 yards a game on defense. You know what their turnover margin is? Plus double digits.
So it's situational. It's situational defense.
No question. They might be giving up yards, giving up plays, but the offense isn't turning it over, and the defense is getting 2 to 3 possessions a game because of a turnover. Well, in that league, you get 2 stops in that league, and you're any good on offense, you're probably going to win the game. But I don't know if I can necessarily say that in any other league. That's why I think in any other – and we're seeing, listen, with Mississippi State right now, when you look at what Kentucky did, Kentucky is, I think, a pretty darn good football team when they don't turn the ball over. They really are. And up front on defense, they've got some guys. And they literally ransacked Mississippi State's offensive line with a 3-man rush.
3-man rush, Luke.
There was nowhere to go with the football. So what happened? Quarterback's under duress. What does he do? Throws it up for grabs, and you turn the ball over. They threw 13 interceptions in 3 weeks.
I talked to a guy, we've got a few minutes here, Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN on the Coors Light guest line. Lugs, I talked to a guy yesterday like you that's an insider, and he said, Bo, go look at the cut-ups on YouTube of Costello throwing the ball 2 years ago at Stanford, and look at him throwing the ball now. He believes there's something wrong with his arm. Are you buying any of that? Or it looks like he's
right
shot
now, there's
putting.
something wrong with his eyes.
Yeah, well, that's what Leach said. His eyes are not – actually, Leach said his eyes haven't been in the right place at all. But it also looks like he's – as someone who played quarterback at Georgia Tech, it looks like he's shot putting the football, if that makes sense.
He's always had a bit of that, though, in his release. Maybe it's become more accentuated. I don't know if there's anything going on with his arm, but he's always had a little bit of that low elbow, push the ball, not so much pass the ball appearance to his delivery. He had that in high school.
Okay. This happened at Washington State, Tom, where it was a very difficult transition in year one, and then year two got a lot better. And then I know you called their games once they kind of started rolling. I'm not – when I have a guy who's got a track record of success in business or anything, I'm not one to throw that person in the gutter after a few weeks.
You can't.
I think this thing will work eventually. What are your thoughts?
Well, I kind of just keep going back to what I've said each and every week. I think with the SEC, and maybe not so much this year, but consistently year in and year out, I think we'd all agree this is a line of scrimmage league, right?
Sure.
Well, if it's a line of scrimmage league and you're struggling versus three-man rush, that's not good. So, and right now everything is so one-dimensional because there's no threat of the run. You've got negative plays due to sacks, and you've got turnovers, and you're throwing it on every down. So somehow, some way, you got to create some semblance of balance to the attack, because what's happening right now, people just feel like, okay, we don't have to put our guys on an island, we don't have to play man-to-man, and they're not going to run it, so we can have a light box. We can throw everything back in coverage and make them take the underneath stuff and come up and tackle. So how do you get people out of that? And the answer, in my opinion, is you've got to come up with a way of running the football, particularly on early downs, so that they got to start bringing some people back in the box to stop you.
Okay. So one of the I'm not going to have enough time here. One of the Washington State guys said that, you've got to check in to throwing the ball to the tailback prior to the snap, because you've got to get the ball out, that Costello or Will Rogers have to get the ball out basically when they're planning, right, to go into their break, and they're not doing that, to supplement for that to be the running game. Does that make sense, Luke?
Oh, yeah. And that's what they've done. They've used flare routes and flat routes and screens, and those things have all been an extension of the run game, and it's all on the perimeter. But you don't have any semblance of a true run game for the most part, tackle to tackle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What, Blake?
That doesn't matter when you give up sacks 5-on-3, Tom. I love all this talk about offense, but
well,
none
that's
of
where
it
it started.
I know, and that's my point. I said this to Brad Edwards yesterday. None of it matters if you're getting beat 3-on-5 consistently.
That's right. But why are people doing that? Why are people doing?
Because the offensive line apparently can't block water. I don't. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
understand that, but I guess what I'm saying to you is the real reason behind it is defensively, the opponents don't think, number one, that Mississippi State can run the ball. Number two, they don't even think they're going to attempt to.
We'll leave it. Oh, real quick, Alabama, Georgia. You got a pick?
Yeah, Alabama will play well and they'll win.
There we go. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Coors Light guest line. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right. See you, man. Later.
The Hit was brought to you by Havana Smoke Shop. That is your go-to for premium cigars. I-55 North Frontage Road and their new location right across from Shaggy's Reservoir. All right, so we're looking at Olivas, Perdomos, Liga Privadas, La Flor Dominicanas, you name it, they've got it. At Havana Smoke Shop, I-55 North Frontage Road in Jackson, and right across from Shaggy's at the Reservoir, their new location. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, is presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue, the official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds Show.